Minutes to the hour of 8 o'clock. This is the Kickstarter segment of Morning at NTV. I'm glad you're still with us, those that went with us into the break. If you're just joining us from wherever you are watching, a warm welcome to Morning at NTV. The discussion this morning is the latest escalation of tensions in the vast east of the Democratic Republic of Congo following the apparent takeover of the city of Goma by M23 rebels on Sunday. The city was overrun, albeit in a mode that wasn't violent. The M23 rebels took over, and part of what they say is their renewed effort to ensure that Kinshasa comes clean on key commitments that they want the administration there to work on. What we do know right now is that ongoing efforts are underway by all stakeholders to ensure there is a de-escalation of these latest tensions. The president of Kenya, who is the chairman of the East African Community, is already up in arms too, saying that an extraordinary meeting of the leaders should be held to ensure that the de-escalation begins right away. Before I introduce my guests, let's first listen in to William Ruto speaking there in a video that was outed hours after the news came through of the tensions in Goma.
The escalating conflict and deteriorating situation in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo are a grave concern to the people and governments of East Africa. Noting the worsening humanitarian crisis exacerbated by ongoing military actions, including the closure of airspace in Goma, I call for the immediate and unconditional cessation of hostilities. I emphasize the obligation of all parties to facilitate humanitarian access to affected populations and urge both sides to pursue peaceful means to resolving this tragic conflict. These alarming developments, coupled with rising diplomatic tensions in the region, underscore the urgent need for peaceful resolution to a conflict that continues to inflict untold suffering on the people, particularly women and children. As the current chair of the East African Community, Kenya is aware of the region's critical responsibility in de-escalating violence and facilitating dialogue between the parties involved. We confirm and firmly believe that a sustainable solution can only be achieved through engagement, constructive dialogue, and a renewed commitment to peace. I call on the parties to the Luanda process on Eastern DRC and appeal specifically to my brothers, President Felix Kulayigye and President Paul Kagame, both of whom I have had the occasion to speak to this evening, to heed the call for peace from the people of our region and the international community. I call on them to dedicate all efforts towards achieving peace in Eastern DRC and restoring good neighborliness, an essential principle underpinning regional peace and collective responsibility. Consequently, and having consulted with the heads of state of our region, we will be convening an extraordinary East African Community Summit within the next 48 hours to facilitate and to deliberate on this crisis and chart a way forward. This is in line with the East African Community Summit's decision of November 2024, which called for constructive engagement to address this conflict. I thank both President Tshisekedi and President Kagame for their confirmed participation in this summit. Additionally, the African Union must not remain passive in the face of this escalating crisis. The East African Community stands ready to forge a stronger collaboration with the African Union and SADC, as well as the international community in encouraging the warring parties to prioritize engagement.
Kenyan President William Ruto speaking there in the aftermath of the latest escalation of tensions in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, urging the leaders to do everything possible to de-escalate. But what is the M23? The M23 rebel group emerges out of March 23rd, 2009, when it was formed to advance ideas and efforts in ensuring that a certain section of people in the Democratic Republic of Congo have their rights and the being conferred into the army and the administration therein achieved. A brief history says it launched the current rebellion in 2022 after there was a lull for the years. The group has accused the government of Congo of not living up to a peace deal and fully integrating Congolese Tutsis into the army as well as the administration. It also vows to defend the Tutsi interests, particularly against ethnic Hutu militias like the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR, founded by Hutus who fled Rwanda after participating in the 1994 genocide of close to 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus. Since the start of this year, the rebels have seized new territory and reached Goma, the capital of North Kivu province, prompting hundreds of thousands of people to flee and, of course, bringing the region into another tense moment. Right now, I'm joined in the studio by the spokesperson of the Uganda People's Defense Forces and the Ministry of Defense and Veteran Affairs, Brigadier General Felix Kulayigye. Many thanks for making it this morning.
My pleasure.
I'm also joined by Honorable James Kakooza, Yala MP. Many thanks to see you. And on our extreme left is Tolit Atiya, seasoned policy analyst and strategic security scholar. Many thanks for making it too. Let me begin with General Felix Kulayigye. In light of the escalating tensions and events occasioned upon the region on Sunday, where the forces of the M23 overran Goma, it's a familiar script, so to speak, given the history of the vast east of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the contestation, be it political or economic. What is the latest on the ground, given your good offices as the spokesperson of the UPDF that has a good footprint within the region?
Thank you, Mr. Chigenyi. When I heard you say apparent takeover, I was wondering where you are reading from. They have taken over, it's not apparent.
The reason was
yes,
the incursion into Goma was expected to be a violent one. Apparently it wasn't, and I keep using that word because we depend on a lot of reports when coming up with the reports that we also give the public. But I'm now thrilled that you are with us. What is the latest? And what is on the ground?
Goma is firmly in the hands of the M23.
Of the M23, yeah.
The government forces and their allies, the Wazalendo, militias, were ordered actually to surrender to MONUSCO, which they did. There are several video clips showing them with their arms on their heads as they are reporting the stadium where they were told.
Yeah.
Quite an embarrassing part if you're a soldier. You know, when you're a soldier, it's good to be a victor, but to be vanquished is the worst position you can be in. But whereas I'm smiling about this situation could have been avoided. Well, maybe I will not jump the gun. But the situation is, yes, Goma is in the hands of M23. That threatens Bukavu, that threatens Sake, that threatens all the other nearby towns, because this is the city, almost the capital of the entire eastern. And I don't see anything stopping them from getting Kisangani. I don't see it. So, in those circumstances, the effort His Excellency Ruto has made is commendable. But I leave it to that.
The long-standing, and let me stay with you on this, this is a long-standing conflict that keeps on emerging depending on the waves within the politics of the day in the region. What is the latest trigger that had the M23 thinking, I think it's about time that we go on with this fight, because a few things haven't been taken care of. I spoke about the failure by the regime in Kinshasa to fully integrate them into the military and the administration. But are there any other foundational aspects away from that?
The consistent killing of wananchi by these militias who are allied to the government forces.
Okay.
You have seen several dead bodies of massacres taking place in different parts of that region. They are not different from what the ADF was doing in Ituri. Now, if you are a population, you either accept to be slaughtered by like chicken, or you take up arms and defend yourselves. And it's a consistent narrative. I will not forget what happened in 2006, 2007, again the areas of Murenge Hills, where the Banyamulenge were massacred massively. There have been repeated genocides against one ethnic group in this particular region. In fact, immediately after the 1994 Rwanda genocide, the talk was never again. And so the regional, the countries in the region would have had or had reason to actually make an intervention in Eastern Congo because of that genocide. Now, they did restrain themselves and reached that decision where the summit decided to deploy an East African Regional Interventionist Force, which you call ECRAF. And for me, the first opportunity lost was the 2009 peace talks between government and M23, which were being mediated by Uganda, in particular Dr. Crispus Kionga, where they even signed that agreement. So the birth of M23, as you put it rightly, was a failure in implementation of the agreement of 2009. Now, that aside, having seen that what you did has not paid, you have again, you are back to war. The opportunity offered by the EAC in deploying this force, that's why it's called interventionist, was to create an environment for political settlement. Again, His Excellency Shekedi wanted the state ECRAF to fight M23. Now, then you become not an interventionist force, you become part and a parcel of the conflict. Of the conflict, yeah. Yes. And yet, really, as a region, our interest is peaceful settlement of these conflicts, because we want to trade with this and the DRC. Because that's a vast market, unsatisfied, and we must utilize it. But you cannot do it when guns are not silent. That is right. Yeah. Honorable James Kakooza, I'll be coming to you shortly, given your good offices as a member of the East African Parliament. We've just had President William Ruto emphasize the need for the region to come and, of course, ensure that this is taken care of very effectively. But allow me engage Mr. Tolit Atiya, but I think that will be very shortly. Let me just stick to you for now. Honorable James Kakooza, listening to President William Ruto, the urgency of this matter is very clear. And it does speak to the fact that maybe the escalation could have been avoided if the leaders had paid a little bit more attention to the concerns that are raised by the M23 as espoused by General Kulayigye.
I think after Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, cooperating with other partner states, applying to join, it could have adhered to the principles. If the viewers can allow me just within a second, the Pan-Africanism which was started by the founders by then, Nkrumah, Patricia Lumumba, and also the coming of East African Community in 1963, there were three pillars only. That was prosperity, strategic security, and undugu. Because after coming in the scramble of Africa, people found out that they need to unite together, and then they have to work together, and then the citizens must enjoy. So after 1999, then they found out that really the cooperation between the East African community, there were 3 countries, you remember? It was Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. That they expanded the pillars. Yeah. One was customs union. The second one, it was common market. Then the third one was federation, and then the monetary union. So within that, strategically, somebody who is joining a group, you would have known the foundation. What is important, by then the founders thought that the strategic security within the region must be paramount. And ideologically, if you're Pan-Africanist, you can't be in a regime whereby you can see that people are dying every day. What M23 is complaining about is really real. Because for me, if you see the videos which Mwalimu Nyerere was talking about in 1999, he said that for me, I cannot allow the Maasai of Uganda, I mean the Maasai of Kenya, chasing them, denying them to become Tanzania, or the Maasai of Tanzania, me chasing them to go to Kenya. When the boundaries came in, these people stayed in those areas.
That is right.
And now, it's about almost 50 years ago, you are denying them an identity to be citizens of that particular country. So the best way is, as a reader within that, you have to accommodate. And historically, it has never happened to Uganda. You know, the revolution we carried out between 81 up to 85, all those tribal sentiments wanted to come in, but they were stopped, because ideologically must be, as a reader, grounded, that you have an ideology of uniting the citizen, however much you want to know. That politics of identity stopped a long time ago. Otherwise, if you want it, it will push you at the wall if you're a reader.
Let's be very specific, especially when you speak about the politics of identity and a leader failing to understand the dynamics within which communities live, especially following the distortions that happened after colonialism. Are you suggesting that President Tshisekedi of the Democratic Republic of Congo is not attendant to these facts, and he does not want to accept that maybe on this side of the Congo there are Tutsis that ought to live as citizens?
Exactly. Of course, if you are reading the whole, you know, that strategic security of the founders in 1963, they knew that things can happen, can escalate to that. Even Undugu, you know, all these countries which we are cooperating now, they're almost the same.
Okay.
So, you as a reader, what is your vested interest? Apart from the external forces that might be there. But you must be very calculative and mathematically calculated. That as a reader, you are coming in to read Citizen and also to understand them, what are their problems. And the moment you neglect them, I'm not really on this TV. When my brothers and sisters left to go to Rwanda, I knew it in 1987. Those people told us that, because they used to tell Habyarimana that, please, we belong to this country, but we want to come back home. The moment you suppress a certain group of people, they will have to defend themselves.
It's just a time bomb.
It's just a matter of time. So I'm suspecting I'm not a prophet
of doom.
But something, it will happen.
Okay.
Like it happened when our brothers left here to go to Rwanda. Because they used to say, please, we are coming back home. We are tired of being told the refugees every day and night. The man said, no, the country is very, very what?
Very small.
Very small. What happened?
Okay. Tolit Atiya, I see you are amused by that, no doubt. But allow me, I'm going to have to pick up from this on you. The conflict does have everything buried and seated in the genocide of Rwanda that occasioned upon the region migration and perhaps people seeking an enclave. But again, vested interests on both parties or both ends of the border do continue to push here and there. And maybe Tshisekedi has his reasons as to why he does not want maybe to allow the Tutsi, who are in the Democratic Republic of Congo, have their rights as they want them. What could be the underlying reason as to why? Because he has spoken very evidently, or rather very eloquently, about the fact that there is interference on the part of Kigali in support of the Tutsi in the Democratic Republic of Congo to destabilize the DRC. Please.
Thanks for that question. And of course, we started off in a very interesting tone. The good general told you there's no doubt the M23 is taken hold of Goma. And maybe just to reiterate the importance of Goma. Goma, by the way, is what you'd call a centripetal force in this region. Goma is in the most center of the East Africa and the Horn.
Yes.
It's from Kampala, from Kigali, from Nairobi,
Kinshasa.
from Kinshasa. It's all about 1 hour, 1 hour and a half. The good general will tell you that when you are laying out a military plan or strategy of attack, you need what they call depth for your defense. In modern warfare, with the incorporation of technology, when you have 1 hour between you and your depth, you really need to be worried. What am I talking about? I'm trying to say there is nothing to smile about in the situation in Goma, because it can go either way because of space and time. So we could be in Kampala this morning and we are speaking about Goma like, hey, there, hey, there, but it could be here. So anyway,
Perfectly understand.
Yes, the issue here is that the historical questions, just like MP Kakooza has raised, the General has raised, are things that Kinshasa cannot run away from. And these are things that the leaders of the region have attempted. There is actually almost nothing in the past, say, 20 years that has not been done to try and get the guns silent in Kinshasa. There has been a process of demobilization, because we know that the place is infested with all these militia groups. Actually, the nomenclature is now a problem. I don't know whether they are militia groups, they are now mercenaries.
Groups,
mercenaries. I do not know which.
It's a cocktail.
You do not know which military doctrine to use. There has been a stabilization force. The UN force in the Congo, I think, has been the second largest deployment in the world.
Second, which one?
Oh, I think the biggest was the one in the Czechs, Czechoslovakia, Slovenia at that time.
96.
Or it could even be the largest. It's the biggest,
yes.
So you can.
And the most expensive.
And the most expensive. And there have been peace talks. But one thing I want to say, probably something new to this thing, and I want to pick up from what the General said, that there have been lost opportunities. And I think any framers of this discourse going forward need to take stock of these lost opportunities. Because in a conflict, you have these two things. You have positions, you have interests. Positions don't change. Interests can change. And if you want to engage as a skilled negotiator or facilitator, then you need to draw the attention of the participants or the protagonists more to their interests. Because the Hutus, of course there are also Hutus, but we're only talking about the Tutsi. There are also Hutus, and maybe now that that word comes from my mouth, there is this question of framing. How do you frame this conflict? I do not know what the East Africa community is saying, because if you look at the position of Rwanda, very simply they are saying this is an internal problem, and Congo DR has to deal with it. If you come to Congo, they are talking of an invasion. That is framing. If you speak to the protagonists themselves, the M23 are actually in a war of self-determination.
I like the employ of the word self-determination, because it kind of brings us to the basic fight that is.
Yes.
People want to have an identity of their own within this particular setting, and maybe the other forces don't want to look at it as they are.
You, Mr. Tigeni,
please do.
As you are inviting Mr. Tolit, you mentioned about this stemming from the Rwanda genocide, as if these are people who ran into Congo as refugees. They are not.
They are not.
They are bona fide Congolese by virtue of the demarcation of the borders by the colonialists.
Great.
So they are not foreign in any way.
And they are saying...
Many thanks. I appreciate the correction.
On that?
We are going for a break. When we return, we shall, of course, delve into just about everything. And I love the fact that that has been clarified. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm glad you're still with us. We are discussing the conflict in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the latest escalation of tensions following the takeover of the city of Goma by the rebel group, the M23. Right now, interventions are from all stakeholders, the politicians, the stakeholders, including the East African community, as led by President William Ruto. We do understand that an extraordinary summit is due to be held anytime now, most probably on a video call, and that will, of course, see President Felix Kulayigye and President Paul Kagame speak to each other and try to resolve this particular issue. But before we continue with the discussion, allow me introduce Daniel Kibate, who will be bringing us perspective on this and help us understand exactly what is on the ground.
Reports from the eastern Congolese town of Goma speak of chaos after water and electricity supplies were cut following the reported capture of the area by the rebel M23 movement this morning. The capture of the town comes on the back of intensive fighting between the M23 and DR Congo's army FARDC since the start of the year. Goma, which is closer to the Rwanda border than the rest of DR Congo, is a vital trading and transport hub with over 1 million residents. Following news of the capture of Goma, Kenyan President William Ruto, who is also the chairperson of the East African community, revealed that he would take action over the matter.
Escalating conflict and deteriorating situation in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo are a grave concern to the people and governments of East Africa. Noting the worsening humanitarian crisis exacerbated by ongoing military actions, including the closure of airspace in Goma, I call for the immediate and unconditional cessation of hostilities.
The M23 has taken control of vast swathes of mineral-rich eastern DR Congo since 2021, and the United Nations estimates more than 400,000 people have fled their homes in the past month. The United Nations accuses Rwanda of supporting the M23 rebels, but Kigali has denied the claims.
The Secretary General calls on the M23 to immediately cease its offensive, withdraw from all occupied areas, and abide by the 31st of July 2024 ceasefire agreement. The Secretary General also said that he is deeply troubled by the most recent report of the group of experts concerning the presence of Rwandan troops on Congolese soil and continued support to the M23.
Rwanda's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Ernest Rwamucho, on Sunday told United Nations Security Council officials that his country does not have a hand in the crisis in eastern DRC. This was during the UN Security Council's emergency meeting held in New York to address the escalation of violence in the eastern DRC.
The solution to this problem cannot be outsourced. It requires ownership and political will, and looking at the root cause of the conflict comprehensively and addressing them. Partners can support, but partners cannot fully own and resolve this problem.
We will be convening an extraordinary East African Community Summit within the next 48 hours to facilitate and to deliberate on this crisis and chart a way forward.
The M23 accused the DRC government of failing to obey the Luanda process that largely urged the warring sides to pursue a political process and dialogue in order to resolve their differences.
I call on the parties to the Luanda process on Eastern DRC and appeal specifically to my brothers, President Felix Kulayigye and President Paul Kagame, both of whom I have had the occasion to speak to this evening, to heed the call for peace from the people of our region and the international community.
Meanwhile, NTV understands that the Ugandan army is on high alert to ensure that Uganda's territory remains peaceful even as the conflict in eastern DRC escalates. Local leaders want government to take necessary precautions in order to counter threats that may arise.
We share a border with DRC as Uganda, and anytime such a conflict can extend to our borders or inside our borders. So it is concerning. Of course, it also escalates the refugee crisis at our borders.
But
all right, thank you very much, Mr. Daniel Kibet, for that report. Of course, it does bring another perspective and an understanding of exactly where things are in Goma. In studio, we have General Felix Kulayigye, also have Honorable James Kakooza, as well as Tolit Atiya, a strategic studies scholar in Nkumba. The story of the M23 is one that is acted in the search for identity and self-determination, the need to belong. And this one is something that you can never deny a human being. They will continue to fight until the humans achieve this particular one. Yes. Now, the question is, if the M23 are fighting for self-determination and identity, ideally, Kinshasa is denying them that. Rwanda is pushing for the fact that they should be able to be identified as citizens and have their rights accorded to them. But there's an interesting...
Actually, that's not a Rwanda affair.
It's not a Rwanda affair alone.
It's a regional interest.
It's a regional interest.
Yes.
Okay. There is something I should introduce into this whole thing, and this is what usually propels conflicts into dimensions that are far beyond the foundational aspects. For more than a year now, the M23 controls Congo's coltan mining region of Rubaya, and it's generating an estimated $800,000, that is Uganda shillings, 2.9 billion per year, not per month, through what it's calling a production tax. Now, within the geography of the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, if you are within that setting that has minerals, you will have to ensure you control these minerals in order to generate some bit of money. Why am I saying this? Minerals could be at the center of the escalation of the tensions in the Democratic Republic of Congo. One would reason, if we take minerals out of this, a solution will be found right away. Can't that be the case?
How?
Scholar?
How? No. You see, before you come in, sir, allow me to help you a bit. I want to send the foundation to help you this.
All right.
It's factual that the Congolese conflict is both identity and resource. Okay?
Resources are the fun that keeps, you know.
I've asked this question before, and I keep asking, are we dealing with only M23 as the problem? There are 136
militia groups that extend into...
Now I hand over.
Please.
Actually, if you look at the history of our countries, as the founders of Pan-Africanism and patriotism, if you come into a play, what you need to understand is the gymnastic of the people you are reading. How do you go about them? How do you treat them to achieve your leadership? The moment one group or one people say, for us, we are not getting the way how we want to be, how we are denied, like the Tutsis, Dev Nyamlenga saying, I'm born here. When they demarcated the borders, I was here.
We were here.
I've married. I have no right to where to go. But you are telling me, go away. Where should I go?
Statelessness.
And that's why for them they say we go with our land.
If you are saying that you are chasing that, you are not recognized as Congolese, let's go with our land, and this is our territory.
Yeah, and that will call for creation of new states within.
And these people should not mislead people.
Looking at it from a layman's perspective, it's not the worst of things if we created a new state within the Democratic Republic of Congo. But let me have
the best example before he comes in. What escalated South Sudan to come against Sudan?
Yeah, at the end of the day.
At the end of the day?
My proposition is plausible. Let's have the let's have the scholarly aspect on this. Please, at the end of it all, solutions must be found because people know what the problem is.
Yeah, you see, just before I delve into the actual facts around the Congo, and then that enclave, there is a history to this contestation, or between, stateness and then the aspects of wealth, so to speak. And this is not new. I just wanted to give you a quick background. Let's look at colonial Britain. Slavery into then colonialism and then all that. And once Britain realized that the population was growing and the resources were not going to be able to be sufficient within, they decided to go and explore the Americas. And this was coming, from the reports we're getting from the explorers and all that. And this is how the Americas were founded. The Americas were founded largely to try and have a buffer zone, resource zone, to be able to hold Great Britain together. Yeah. So they come to the Americas. Once they're in the Americas, North America is actually bare land. It's resourceless. So when they landed there, they discover, actually, what is feeding here is down here in the south. And that is how they move to the south. This gives you a picture that contestation over resources or interest of resources arising from nation states. And we know that nation states are a recent creation. Nation states started emerging after the World War, and then the issue, the Vienna and all that history, the Vienna Conference. So when you come down to the Congo, this is not surprising. The latest or the youngest independent state in the region we know is Southern Sudan. When the Southern Sudan question was being resolved, there was a matter that was left pending. And it was, what was it? It was an issue over resource. The Abyei issue was not resolved. And they had, that text was very complex. But they pushed and had to conclude it and strategically left out Abyei as a matter for tomorrow. But do you know, this is what has brought challenges into Southern Sudan to date? Yes. Because the Abyei question is unsettled.
Is unresolved.
So the question of resource is a serious question. I want to tell you something interesting. States, as you see, states are like human beings. The needs of states are like it's just, you can liken it to human beings. Just like human beings have couples of desires and needs, states have desires and needs. States can also be human because they are run by humans. So why are they human? States can make mistakes. States actually make mistakes in their decisions and sometimes need to be corrected. So when you look at the complexity of Rwanda into this matter, the complexity of history, the challenge that...
Can I be specific?
Yes.
What mistakes has Kigali made with regard to this whole
I don't want,
because it has acted consistently.
I don't want to single out.
And it has vested interests.
I don't, and it's not only Kigali. Probably the
let's first talk about
Kigali and Kigali and Kinshasa. I'll start with Kinshasa.
Uganda is also a person.
Yes, and I'll come to Uganda. I'll start with Kinshasa. For instance, sometimes we have insisted in the study of democracies and the push for democratic credentials that it is very important in any democracy to allow an exposition of an issue. Let voices come out. Let there be debate over issues. One thing we are quickly beginning to forget is how Tshisekedi ascends to power. There was a big issue around the departure of Kabila and Tshisekedi. Tshisekedi was actually a compromise candidate. You know that?
Interesting there.
And there was not much debate. You pointed out that Goma fell or has fallen almost bloodless and with celebrations. I've seen videos of people celebrating in Bukavu and all these neighboring towns. Why? We are talking about M23 as if it is the issue. M23 is not the issue. The issue is the unsettled questions in political questions in the DR Congo, and there are many.
All right.
You know?
And one thing I realize is that on a scholarly perspective, the conversation will go more, will require more time than I have on Morning at NTV. But let's keep it to the political and the possibility that solutions can be found to address this particular issue. The East African community does stand as one body that can actually prevail. Or am I mistaken about that?
No, that's true. Because when you look at the treaty, how it was signed,
it could, but does it have the potence?
How they designed it, it was a designed way of having vested interest within the corporation. And when you're in the corporation, all of you agree to do one thing. That's why in East African community they have a standby force. And when they have a standby force, it comes to see that the region they are in, they engage, they solve it. The regime in Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, didn't allow that. But remember, when you are joining the group, which is a bit stable, you must be a bit flexible. Because I don't see any reason calling the SADC alliance when you have the neighboring who could engage and solve a problem. And this is what they were saying in 1963, that that was by then Nyerere and the people who founded the East African Community. They said, no, as neighbors, we can agree and sort out certain issues. So the cooperation, when you join the cooperation, because remember, there were 3 countries, they expanded. What were the interests? We can expand the common market. We have trade, people can be. Then we agree after common market. Then we can trade each other. Yeah, and then we have security. And security was the strategic reason.
I do respect, and I believe that optimism is one that is shared by so many people, that the East African community can actually come up with a solution with this. But one thing I do see is that until the conflict itself or the contestation between the Tutsi and the Hutu on the DRC side of the border is dealt with, any other political issue.
It's only the leadership within Congo to solve its own
issues. There is a political and leadership vacuum in the Congo, and many people take advantage of that.
When you don't solve
General.
When you don't solve it,
I wish you had the permission within your designation as the spokesperson of the military and the Ministry of Defense to talk about the intricate detail of this conflict. Do you?
I can hazard within my parameters.
Please do, because I do feel.
You see, you should not isolate their discussions from each other.
No, we cannot do that.
They are contextual within this problem. The vision of 1963, and that's why President Museveni gave us a gift, that photograph to the heads of states. It was to remind his colleagues, this is what our forefathers had as their vision.
As their vision, yeah.
The inclusion of DRC into the East African community had the following benefits to both the Congolese and the entire region. One, strategic security that the Honorable Kakooza is talking about. He talked about strategic depth. If you are East Africa that starts from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean, you have strategic depth. You now have a region that is bigger than Europe, almost twice. So anybody who will be threatening the stability of any of the member states has to think twice. That's number one. Number two, you stop the arms race within the region. Uganda goes the arms market, Rwanda the same, DRC the same, Kenya. No. You now have a common security strategy. All right? And you will agree. You handle Air Force. You deal with the water security because you are the ones who are on the oceans. You deal with the land forces. You specialize for a common defense of the East African community. Three, the market. 80 million in DRC, 47 million in Uganda. I think about 70 to 60 million in Tanzania. Kenya, the same. South Sudan, the same. So you're talking of 300 or 400 million. That's a very huge market. You will attract investors.
Now,
so for us, our interest in the integration of the East African community is just beyond cliche. It's not romanticism. It's real. It's about a question of survival.
Maybe I can give you information.
Yes.
You see the global trend today, you know, as Kevin Skoll said, that the environment dictates the trend of the day. There is no country now, economically, can survive when you stand alone.
Survival.
You must cooperate.
You remember
You see why European Union is very strong than other countries which opted out. Why? They want to survive. This is what one of the pillars of 1963, they said, the citizens, we must create wealth for prosperity. People to trade to each other, people to move from
now, gentlemen,
and that security.
I know you're running out of time.
No. But these are issues when you are a read and cooperating with others.
Yeah.
Which you must understand. That you cannot stand alone when the citizens are being massacred and what
Great.
These things.
All right. It's not running out of time. We still have 25 minutes to talk.
Do you realize there are two recent events that actually make this dream a possibility or a reality? The Atekere Festival in Soroti.
Actually, the citizen, yes. That's what I want to talk. Yeah.
The citizens themselves coming together all the way from Ethiopia, from DRC.
That is right.
And there were one community meeting in Soroti.
Great.
That's the Undugu.
The Luo.
I'm afraid we're going to have to go for a break. When we return, we shall continue the discussion, and hopefully we could be able to offer some bit of insight on what solutions could be sought to de-escalate the latest tensions, but most importantly, to find a long-standing solution to this particular conflict and assure the region of all the benefits as espoused by General Felix Kulayigye, Honorable James Kakooza, and Atiya Tolit here on Morning at NTV. I'm glad you're still with us here. We're trying to understand how best solutions can be arrived at in solving the long-standing conflicts in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. What we do have right now is the takeover of Goma city by the M23, but my reading of events and trends indicates that the takeover of Goma by the M23 is ideally not really the problem, because there are a lot more militias in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo that stretch as far as the northern parts of the country. Whether those ones will also be dealt with as effectively as they ought to remains to be seen. We are attempting to get to terms with what can be achieved. Already there is effort underway by the East African community and President of Kenya, William Ruto. My guests have attempted to bring us up to speed with what we ought to understand. However, as a journalist and one that has some institutional memory on these matters, I believe that East Africa is grappling with ivory tower idealism. Ivory tower idealism, my colleagues, I know, my guests rather, apologies for saying your colleagues, you're a general, he's a doctor, and he's an honorable.
We are fellow citizens.
We are fellow citizens. Ivory tower idealism is the tendency for the people who are knowledgeable about matters that could be conditioning certain events and circumstances to think solutions can be arrived at by appeal. For example, when you think that another party will take matters as you see them, in other words, the other party will be reasonable. I'm afraid people are not always reasonable, and they will not think the way you think. When you talk about the East African market, when you talk about the geographical advantages that come from the space that is from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, anybody who reads into this will say, wow, we have an advantage and we should be able to capitalize on that. But there is an underlying issue, and people are fighting for certain other things, and they want them by hook or crook. If I were to ask a question in my own attempts to come to a solution, what does Tshisekedi and Kinshasa lose if the Tutsi who are on the DRC border, side of the border, actually get their rights as they demand them? What does Kinshasa lose? If you don't mind, take it on.
Yeah, you see, Tshisekedi is in a very complex situation. A narrative was formed, even before Tshisekedi took over the echelons of power, and that was with Kabila II. Actually, Tshisekedi came to power on the ticket that he would stem off Rwanda. The narrative was that Rwanda is an aggressive force. So, when you begin to ask whether and I don't want to call them just Tutsi. I want to look at them correctly. The Rwandaphone speakers, because they're more than Tutsis. There are a couple of other little tribes there. And these tribes, by the way, cascade across almost all these East African countries. They are in Tanzania, they are in Burundi, and as you know, as I do, that Burundi is also being accused of meddling into the affairs in the Congo. There is Burundi actually says Congo is harboring an opposition group. This group, these Rwandaphone speakers, are in Uganda. So, it is a matter that should be collaboratively resolved. But the head spear, as we speak today, sits in Kinshasa. Kinshasa needs to sort out this issue. Kinshasa needs to have a political retrospect, sit down and say, we are going to deal with the political issues. And by the way, you would not blame Rwanda, so to speak. I know there has been a lot of accusations around Rwanda, and I dare say this. Because you have a backyard that, just to give a simple illustration, just assume you have a home and you have a neighbor. You have built up your place, you secured it, and you have a neighbor who has not started developing their home, and there is a bush. And there can be anything out of this bush that can creep into
your compound.
Into your compound.
So you begin to do.
If you choose to be vigilant,
yeah,
I don't think there is a problem with that. You know, even in law, even if it came to law, there are interesting things. In commercial law, there's that interesting allegory they give of a mango growing at a hedge, and then the fruits is across the other side. And you know, from the convenience of your home, if you can stretch and
pick the
mango and eat it, it has really become problematic, because then the question is, whose mango? Whose mango is this?
That's an interesting analogy, and one it's one that brings the issue home. So Rwanda is taking advantage of a huge vacuum that is available, a lack of governance, a lack of leadership, and a lack of political structures within this region to cause the kind of meddling that is making Tshisekedi and Kinshasa uncomfortable. What has Rwanda given as the reason as to why it's...
I think the leaders, you see, they must accept that this region does not belong to leaders. It belongs to citizens.
That's a good one.
This region does not belong to leaders.
Because now we see where the problem is. Yes. It's the leaders.
Yes, it does not belong to leaders.
The people meet each other.
The people meet each other, they marry, they do. I can tell you, actually, when Rwanda was crossed here,
if you'll allow, there is a market at the border of Rwanda, Uganda, Congo.
Hey.
Bunagana, is it?
I forget the name, but Congo. It's not. I think the general area is Bunagana, but there is a particular market there. It's one of the busiest markets.
Where no passports are,
you know,
nothing.
And the biggest traders, the head ones in that market are women. The business is driven by women. It has raised very complex security and political issues. Because let's remember, there's the issue of women, and every time we wanted to deal with it. So there's both everything good and everything bad in that market. But one thing that stands out, the trade never stems off.
And what never dies down is where the solution lies. The business, the economics of the day. But again, the economics within the region causes the problem, because people want to...
He used the word interest.
People want to have...
I use the word
people want to have this
interest. I want to inform the people in Kinshasa that really you must think about the citizens themselves, what they want to do. The moment they want to cooperate, you can't stop it.
You can't stop it.
I can tell you, you can't. You can't stop it. If you suppress it, it will come up.
You see, before these borders of yours came in, people were marrying each other from all these sides. And it was just walking, whether it is 20 kilometers, you go and get a break.
For example, could you stop Mudwa Awulira to be a vice president of Kenya?
Mudwa Awori.
Mudwa Awori. And Aguro Awori in Uganda here.
The late Aguro Awori.
Today we have a speaker of Kenya, is from Mbale. And his father has a clan. So it's the same from Lendu. The Lendus are here. They're in the army. Could you stop it? So the best way to go about this, that since we are in the cooperation, we must understand that this cooperation, the citizens within this particular region are the same.
Okay, gentlemen, let me ask you the uncomfortable question. Do you honestly believe that the economic interests of all these countries there can be some sort of a framework on how the resources in the Democratic Republic of Congo can be used? Maybe what Kinshasa wants is for all these interested parties to back off and allow the resources to be exploited.
The statement when Tshisekedi was coming in, I can quote it verbatim.
Please do.
He said that I wish all the natural resources we have within the region. We put them in a market of the East African community, that anybody who comes to buy those resources, we can have a bargaining power as a group, and we share for the interest of the prosperity of the citizen. This is his statement, he said.
Difficult one.
And honorable.
And very
That's what he said.
Honorable.
So if you go along those and recognize that the people I have, they can interact, they can mix, they can do anything. As a leader, you would have solved the problem.
Mr. Chigenyi, Higenyi, sorry.
Yeah.
His statement, there lies the solution, but also there lies the problem. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to elucidate on both.
Please do.
It's a solution, first of all, because it's about interests. Okay? And therefore, internally, you have no issues. It's a problem because the sharks from elsewhere don't want disarrangement.
Now, you've just told us why the conflict is on.
Yes!
The sharks from elsewhere do not want order, do not want peace, do not want stability within the region.
Yes.
Now, before you even submit on anything else, what is the conversation like between the leaders when this aspect of sharks, foreign interests come in? When Mr. Ruto, Mr. Museveni, Mr. Kagame, and Mr. Tshisekedi sit.
Madam Samia.
I've not been party to the conversations in the summits away from the reportage that comes. Do they ever agree that we have powers that are acting for these resources that we cannot confront?
Good question.
Do they?
Did you use the word power?
Powers.
Yeah.
Washington is a power. IMF is a power.
Brussels
is a power. And a huge one indeed, for especially when it comes to the DRC.
I think it depends on how you see it. These powers are there. And I want to give you some figures with a disclaimer. Some figures I've seen. I belong to a group of researchers called the Congo Research Group. And it's headquartered in New York. And there are a lot of scholars doing different things. I saw one of the guys profiling these militia groups we're talking about. And I just took interest in what you call the mercenaries. From his statistics, he says there is a force of about 18,000. You see? Now 18,000 compared to Rwanda, that is at the center of this conflict. And Kinshasa itself is saying Rwanda has sent 4,000. Now, if you have militias 18,000, and there was a Lendo at about 7,000 or something, FADC itself about 20,000, the South African force. So, this creates a hegemony. And for me, to continue dealing with this issue the way we are doing, and I want to say this, there has been a fundamental paradigm shift in the conflict in the Congo. How? One is that the armed groups can best be viewed as shifting armed groups. Let me take the ADF that we are dealing with, and for instance, why we are in the Congo, that we know.
As a country.
Yes. When the ADF got into the Congo, it was a pure Ugandan renegade group, with primary reasons that they claimed and all that. Today, their leader, Jamil Nkulu, is down in the coolers and all that. But we also know that there has been a shift in their attempt to link up with the regional terrorist cells. That's a shifting group. If the M23 itself that we are talking about is not the M23 that entered into negotiations at the eve of 2006-2008 Goma conference, I want to tell you that this M23 of today is a completely different force.
Outfit.
And I want to send a call to whoever is trying to get this issue fixed. that they should be looking at this M23 as a completely different force. Some historical aspects, come with it. It has retained the name, yes, but this is a completely different group. And the solutions for it may not be particularly the same as the one that we sought up to before 2008. And we now need to try to understand what are really their claims. Because Tshisekedi is saying, in his framing, he looks at this as a criminal group. And he's saying there is no way he's going to talk to a criminal force. Other regional leaders have been calling these political conversations. But what have they yielded? I think what is left is what the Honorable MP is saying and what the General has suggested. What about the citizen option? I've told you about that market, and I want to conclude by telling you that for me, I find a stark similarity with what you would see. There is this book I would invite all these leaders to read, Why States Fall. The story is simple. Yeah? At the border of Spain, where the Arizona state is, you have a group that has been split by a border, but they are the same people. On one side, in Arizona, US, the group
Spaniards
has gone to school. Most of them are college graduates. They can afford health insurance. They have 3 meals a day. The life expectancy is well over 65. Across the border, they are siblings, they are family, they are split family.
The border is called what?
I think the names are interesting. Arizona, Asgona, or something like that. So the other side of the border, the guys are dying in filtering poverty. How do you then have, because they speak to each other.
That is right.
So in our case, like for instance, this conflict, just to give you another picture, I have been to Bundibujo, I've been to Kasese, where I do this research work. Cocoa today, there is what you call a cocoa buzz. Everybody is talking about cocoa. Cocoa in that region was discovered almost 10-15 years ago. Now this is the simple story. I am trying to imagine a farmer.
Quickly.
Yes, I'm trying to imagine a farmer in Bundibujo now, how he's looking at this conflict. He's not bothered what is happening to Tshisekedi or whether there is a talk. His only concern is how does he access his garden. Because most of the cocoa farmers in Bundibujo, Uganda, have their gardens of cocoa in Congo.
Across River Semuliki.
All right, so gentlemen, would I be off the mark if I appealed for an economic conference to discuss honestly and rightly what belongs where and who claims to what and what can be exploited, in order for people to understand? Because at the end of the day, this is a fight about minerals. I can assure you, reports indicate that as Goma was being taken over by the M23, more than 1,000 mercenaries. Mercenaries, these are guys who most of them work for groups including Wagner and so forth, were busy guarding mineral batches that are ready to be put on the plane and taken out of Goma. This was happening. So as guns and bullets are firing on a certain hill, these mercenaries are not concerned about that.
And they were not attacked.
They weren't attacked. No one passes a certain position to attack the mercenaries who are loading coltan, who are loading minerals onto planes. Now, do our leaders have this conversation when the summit sits? I want to ask this question.
You see,
you've been a minister before.
Yeah.
Do our leaders have this conversation?
You see, they do have, but when one group doesn't want to accept, it becomes a complicated matter. And if you don't accept other group's view, it's like you don't want bees to come in your compound. Why do you plant flowers? If you don't want, you don't want bees in your home,
don't plant flowers.
Don't plant flowers.
Honorable Kakooza,
before you close,
yeah, please wrap it up for me very quickly.
I'm requesting Dr. Tolit, for the scholar to examine how come all people who are in a conflict situation never agree that the problem is theirs, but they think the problem is
somebody else's. All right, that's a question that you will you'll be able to embark on in your research, and maybe on the next sometime in the future we can have an opportunity to hear what you've come up with. Many thanks, Dr. Tolit Atiya. My apologies earlier for not making reference to that. Many thanks to you too, Honorable James Kakooza, and many thanks Brigadier General Felix Kulayigye, spokesperson of the Ministry of Defense and Veteran Affairs, as well as the Uganda People's Defense Forces. It's been a pleasure having your perspectives on this particular conflict. I hope it has emboldened your understanding of what is going on. But my plea as I close is that the leaders must have the conversation that is the foundation of the conflict. Resources, minerals. We cannot have Africa being plundered, and then when the summit convenes, you're beginning to talk about the rhetoric. We want leaders to be very categorical on this and honest about this conversation. Morning at NTV. I'll see you guys tomorrow.